Hi, Ray Cassidy here with a little rundown on Google Analytics 4, which is rapidly going to be your only method of getting data on your website if you rely on Google's free tools. After all, your website data is important to your business, so why not learn to climb high on your website's data? And you won't even have to have a cold seat with a cold bum in the snow in Scotland, sitting underneath a steep lump of ice. Anyway, that's enough of the daftness. On we go. Google Analytics 4. Have you any idea whether your Google Analytics 4, your GA4 property, is set up correctly? Something you can speak to your digital marketing provider immediately to make sure that that's in hand. Big changes are coming. Basically, GA4 was brought about because for many businesses there's a crying need for combining data from websites on desktop and laptop browsers with the websites being displayed on mobile apps because so much search and web activity has moved onto mobile devices. So it's coming, whether you like it or not. And one of the things you will notice is that the home screens of both versions are quite different. Over here is probably what you're familiar with your acquisition reports, behavior, conversion, and various other things, and your admin down the bottom. Whereas over on Google Analytics 4, you've got reports, you've got explorations, and you've got your Google Ads connection. Now, one of the problems is that the two versions of analytics are incompatible with each other. They both collect data in different ways and from slightly different actions. So it's not possible to import your old Universal Analytics data into the new version GA4 or Google Analytics 4. There's two sort of scenarios you might run into if you're setting up a brand new website or you've finally got around to sticking analytics onto your site because you've suddenly realized that, that data might just be important to your website. Then GA4 is what you get. You've got no other option, and it's been doing that for about a year now, I would say. The other option is if you already had Google Analytics, you'll probably find Google Analytics has already stuck a GA4 property into your account alongside Universal Analytics. Now, it's fairly important, really, without getting too hypey about it. It's important to get your Google Analytics 4 set up because for most people who use the free service in July the 1st, it'll stop working. Google will simply not gather data from that platform anymore. And then if you're a larger enterprise using the paid GA360, you get till October before that cessation kicks in. And apparently there's going to be something like a 6-month grace period before your old Universal Analytics data is taken down. They're literally switching off the machines. So literally you're not going to be able to get your data after that. So you need to be planning ahead. As for saving that data, it's not entirely straightforward. You could import it, export it down to Excel, but you'd literally have to go through every single report and download each table from each page. And apparently you can only do it 6 months at a time. So if you've got 10 years worth of data that, probably only want to look back over the last 2 years worth of data. But can you imagine the time consuming nonsense and then trying to manually pull all those separate tables together offline? The recommended method is to export to Google's BigQuery, which is a whole new learning curve, hence that AI generated eek face. But it's interesting. It's a whole new ball game to me anyway. So the old data can be carried across. Apparently, that's going to be allowed. That will be allowed as a free access, but I've had limited experience so far, and it seems fairly technical. But I'm sure we'll quickly become familiar with that. I have my suspicions Google will come out with something a bit less technical as the level of anxiety across the web increases. If you're managing the migration yourself, you'll probably find that there's a GA4 property there. I did find one account that I worked with had not been added to yet, so I had to manually ask for GA4 to be triggered. It's quite possible Google will manually or automatically, I should say, configure those accounts to behave, approximately like your current analytics. But I've seen some fairly weird results being displayed by people with, very, very deep knowledge of this. So it's preferable to do this manually yourselves or with help from a consultant. There's a couple of steps: sorting out the data controllers declaration, and making sure, to say that you're going to comply with GDPR and its equivalents, and then making sure that the data stream is set to UK time, currency, and also making sure you've got enhanced measurement set up. What does that look like? Well, once you're into your GA4 panel, once you go into the admin section, you'll get something like this, and the task is to go into the home screen, down to admin. That'll pop open this panel, which is semi-familiar, into your account settings, and then you'll need to agree to the various restrictions or constrictions of the data processing terms. Tick the box. That hasn't been done yet on that one. And then go into property settings and make sure that the industry categories and reporting time and currency are all set up. And that's relatively straightforward, but tedious, but needs to be done. And then, oh, hang on, stop. Behave yourself, video. Right. Next thing you've got to do is add the code to your website, and it will work fairly happily alongside your existing Universal Analytics code until that time comes in July the 1st for most of us, when we've got to get rid of it. If you're using WordPress, the Monster Insights plugin that a lot of people are using, the paid version, it does make the process very easy. They've got this dual analytics function that will run both lots side by side, and you'll have a very easily comparable two sets of data. Now that plugin's about $100 a year, but they're currently doing a 50% deal, so it might be worth jumping in on that if you want a simple solution. You've only got to provide the GA4 measurement ID to Monster Insights, so it's a fairly straightforward switch. Joomla, the platform that I tend to work in when I'm working with Chris Wilcox of Lightbulb Web Design, it's quite straightforward. You just go into the extensions menu, styles, options, and there's a custom code box in there, or series of custom code boxes. And the GA4 code has two parts. There is a chunk that needs to go in the head of the page, and that needs to be as high up the head code as possible before any other codes and HTML and Java fire off. And then the second part needs to go into the body, and it needs to go just after the body tag, the opening body tag, and ideally before any other code or process fires, so it can capture as much data about what's going on as possible. Drupal, not particularly familiar with, but that seems to involve a 5-step process as, as sort of steps spelt out there. Expression Engine has got a paid add-on to integrate GA4 reports. But if you're not using any of those, or you're trying to cut down on extensions and add-ons and whatnot that might slow your website down, then Google Tag Manager is probably the way to do it. And at a basic level, there's a standard GA4 configuration tab. You stick that into Google Tag Manager. You pop in your measurement ID from GA4, which starts with a G these days rather than the UA of the old style analytics. And then you set a trigger that fires on all pages, and then GA4 will start collecting basic info. But basic info might not be enough, may not be enough, because as you can see from here, there's a massive discrepancy between the two measurements recorded here. And basically, the GA4 in this account hasn't had the Google Analytics account connected to it, and it's recording about 900 users over the 90 days, whereas the old analytics, that is all connected up and everything, that's recorded nearly 4,000 visits. So they're not telling the same story. There's something wrong. So Google Ads account has to be connected, and also the Tag Manager code here hasn't been added to the landing pages that the managers of the ads account are using. Beyond that, that's not going to give you the whole picture. To make best use of GA4, you need to obviously set up the enhanced measurements. I will repeat that. Conversions are different, and basically here you have to go into the conversions section in the Explore menu, and then you add all the various events that are recorded to be recorded as conversions. You need to connect Search Console, just like your Google Analytics. You'd need to connect your Google Ads account, as already mentioned. Now, the reason I've sort of repeated it there is that if you are running Google Ads, it enables you to set up Google Signals. That allows you to collect a lot of demographics info in a hopefully compliant manner, and that will let you plan and segment your audiences much more effectively. And then it's probably worth doing what Google recommend and setting up an SQL project in Google BigQuery up in the cloud there. And if you don't fancy the hassle, despite my relative inexperience with the SQL BigQuery side of it, we're more than happy to help. Okay, so may your traffic explode in 2023 and beyond. And if you want any further assistance, come talk to Climb High SEO, because it's great to be on top of summits and searches. And you can get a hold of us here via these contact details, with the website being at climbhighseo.agency. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and may your traffic grow exponentially.